So with that, welcome everybody to the Florence Area Chamber of Commerce's webinar to address some questions and concerns our community is sharing about our kids and their education and our workforce effect from parents being home taking care of their kids. I ran into one of our friends who's one of the bankers here in town today, and she's already having problems with her staffing, with people not being able to do their regular work schedules because of their kids being home. So that's important issues. Our chamber is a catalyst and a connector, a convener, and a champion. And a part of our championing is to champion for a strong community. And our businesses are a big part of that. And our students are our future. So we're happy to have you join us today for this. And I'm going to turn this over to our wonderful moderator, Russ Pearson from Lane Community College.
Well, thank you, Bettina, and it's wonderful to be with you all today and to have such a distinguished group of panelists here. Let me quickly introduce them, and then, of course, we'll hear from each one over the course of this next hour. Senator Arnie Roblin is our senator here in the 5th District, which is not exactly, but we could more or less say it runs from Coos Bay to Tillamook. Is that fair, Senator Roblin? Excellent. He was the co-speaker of the House from 2011 to 2012. And you know, Arnie, at some point it might be interesting to hear about that experience. I know it was a really great experience, and it would be interesting to hear if you think that something like that might even be possible anymore in the sort of political environment we find ourselves in these days. You as co-chairs did a good job with that. Senator Roblin was in the House of Representatives from 2004 through 2012. He is himself a former math teacher and principal at Marshfield High School in Coos Bay, and served as co-chair of the recent Joint Student Success Committee and led the successful effort to pass the Student Success Act, which greatly benefits our K-12 students throughout the state, including a couple of our panelists who are representing the districts here today. Senator Roblin also founded the Oregon Coastal Caucus, which is a wonderful bipartisan group of both representatives and senators who work together on things that impact all of us who live on the Oregon coast. And their economic summit that they've been hosting each year is epic and really a great event that is useful to all of us who are coastal residents. So thank you, Senator Roblin, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Andy Gruskowiak is the Siuslaw School Superintendent, has been in that role since 2016, but he's been part of the Siuslaw School District for over 20 years. Started at the high school as a science teacher before eventually becoming the athletic director and then vice principal. And Andy is awesome. He's part of my advisory committee at the LCC Florence Center. Andy, thank you for being here today too.
Thank you, Russ.
And Jody O'Mara is likewise a wonderful person and a good friend. She's the Mapleton School Superintendent. And as in all things Mapleton, she wears multiple hats, also served as the elementary principal, and she's been in the superintendent role since 2012. Formerly a principal in the Coos Bay School District down near Senator Roblin. So she's got a little bit of coastal experience all over the place. And before that, she served more than 10 years in the Siuslaw District as a teacher in the elementary and the middle school. So Jody, thank you for being here today as well. And then Robbie Wright is the CEO of HIAC. He is also the chair of the Florence City's Community Economic Development Committee. He's an education guy, attended both Portland State University and Western Oregon University, knows all kinds of stuff, is involved and has his fingers in many parts of our community life. And Robbie, we're excited that you're here today too.
Thank you, Russ.
All right, and also you've met her already, but Bettina Hannigan she has a new title. She is the president and CEO of the Florence Area Chamber of Commerce. So Bettina might pop in from time to time and ask some questions as well. So we're delighted that each and every single one of you is here today, and all of you who are zooming in as well. We're delighted. So Senator Roblin, let me start with you. You click on the right button here. You served as co-chair of the state's Joint Special Committee on Coronavirus Response, and you've long been focused on education issues as an educator yourself. So what can you tell us about where things stand with the state's response to the virus and how the state is poised to continue to help our schools through this difficult time?
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me here. It's really an honor to be on the program with some really great people who I've known for a long time. O'Meara used to spend time at our house because she, instead of driving back and forth when she worked in Coos Bay School District. So it's nice to be reacquainted in this Zoom meeting.
That's great.
We have the legislature and the governor took a long, hard look as we were going into this pandemic and our coronavirus committee and such. We convened a group of economists from all over the state to tell us, you know, as we look at the budget, because we know we're getting hit, we actually lost about $2 billion in incoming revenue. So thankfully the state had about $1 billion. So we were about $1 billion short when we went into this last legislative session. But the issue was, what are we going to hold harmless? What are we going to make investments in? How are we going to balance this budget when we have to cut $1 billion in this last year of this budget? And the co-chairs came clearly, and the economists told us, singularly, they said the most important thing was that you maintain schools. Schools were equally important for the education of children, but as important for the economy as, and we've talked about that in a number of conversations I've had, that parents need schools. They need a place where their kids are safe when they go to work. There's a whole lot of reasons why the economy works better when schools are flourishing. It is also how the workforce gets the training. They also indicated that higher education, including community colleges, were going to be very important for any recovery because the jobs are going to be different as we come out, and we need to make sure that we have capacity in our community colleges and universities. So that was one of the early information we got. And so when the co-chairs sat down to start looking at the budget, they made some early decisions. One was that housing, we had to figure out how to deal with helping people stay in homes, because that's another big issue. And when we had the last recession, foreclosures, all sorts of other things really wreaked havoc on society in general. Number one was hold harmless education. And so we had invested and expected to spend $9 billion. It's the largest single general fund budget in the budget, $9 billion on K-12 education. And they wanted to make sure that we didn't cut that. And that's not easy to do when you're trying to cut $1 billion and you take the largest portion of that money and don't cut it. It means all the rest of them have to get cut worse. So how are we going to go about doing that? The other thing that happened is that we have been, for the last about 4 years, doing much better job at getting prepared for the next downturn in the economy by making sure we have reserves. And one of the reserves was the Education Stability Fund. It had gotten enough money that it was about $800 million in that fund alone. And then the other stability fund, we had another about $800 million. So we had about $1.6 billion in reserves. They didn't want to use those for this session because they anticipate next biennium, we're going to be down $4 billion. So they can't use it all up at one time. But they made a decision early that they were going to take $400 million out of the Education Stability Fund if we could get the supermajority needed in both House and Senate to take that money out. And we did do that this last session, this last special session we had. So we are going to fund K-12 at that same level that we had anticipated, the $9 billion. Number two, as you mentioned, we had the Student Success Act, and in it had a new tax called the CAT tax and corporate activity tax. For the first time in our state's history, we will really be taxing out-of-state corporations as much as others. And the ones that are going to pay the most right now are going to be Amazon, all of these companies that sell stuff into Oregon. In the past, we really didn't get any money from them for our education. Now there will be some money coming to the schools, and it really all goes to schools, either early childhood or K-12 is what we designed it for. It was supposed to bring in about an extra $1 billion, especially around vocational education, training, counseling, all the things that we found out when we went around the state that were needed in schools to make kids feel safe and to give them the opportunities and different activities. So that has also been hit by the economy. They anticipate that it may bring in as much as 600 million as opposed to the $1 billion. So each of the school districts, and you've got two of the leaders here, had to come up with a plan on how they were going to implement that in their particular schools and send that off to the state earlier. They will have an opportunity to readjust as they find out exactly how much money that is. But the state has prioritized education as one of the big issues. The other part of this whole plan has been, how has the governor been dealing with this? And she did bring together an advisory group. I was on that for education. We had people from private schools all over working to give information about how could we reopen schools and what's the safest and best way to do that. She also has a 20-member physicians group, doctors and others that look at all of the plans. So the plans that come out from each school that have to be developed also have to go through this group of doctors to make sure that what they are doing meets the criteria that have been set up about how we keep kids safe. And then, as we'll talk later, I think, you'll see they have come up, the Department of Ed has come up with a list, along with the health department, the kinds of things that we have to look for statewide, countywide, and region-wide that you have to meet with regard to making sure the virus is not going rampant in your areas if you're going to bring kids back into the schools. Because it's not just the schools. You know, before we closed schools almost 6 months ago, we were having a problem in our state with respect to having enough teachers to teach. The flu last year had been bad, and there were a lot of people who were out with the flu. Substitutes are hard to come by, and we had school districts that were having a hard time having enough teachers in the building. That's a big issue with respect to the coronavirus and where we are now. If teachers get sick, they get older you are, the more likely it is that you will be sicker than the youngest kids are. And so making sure you have teachers in place to do the work if you're in school is a really big part of the whole plan and why it's designed the way it is. As we have found, and as the criteria show, the younger you are, the less likely it's going to affect you the most. You kids get it. Some get very, very sick with it, but for the most part, they get mild symptoms the younger you are. So the hope was that we could get in-person schooling for early childhood kids up to 3rd grade before we worried about the next level of kids. And some counties right now are able to do that. Others are not. I think there's 2 or 3 counties that actually meet all the requirements if the state would make its requirement of keeping down a rate of less than 5%. So that's kind of what the legislature's done. We've put a lot of time and effort into this. Our committees have worked long and hard to work with the governor and work with the education department to come up with plans that we think can keep kids safe, families safe, and communities moving forward. We do know that kids need to be around other kids. The socialization, the part of in-school that we're missing right now is really hard on families and children. And we really do want everybody back in school as soon as we can get there. That's pretty much what the state's doing.
Very good. I appreciate that. And Andy, maybe you can kind of pick up where Senator Roblin put down the gauntlet a bit. Is Siuslaw, and Jody, you can speak to this too in terms of Mapleton. Are you in person up to 3rd grade? What's happening at Siuslaw?
Well, so right now we're going to start in comprehensive distance learning. Again, it's looking at where our numbers were when we submitted our plans. We're on the verge of being able to do that or not. And again, you know, the young students are one consideration, but again, most of our teaching staff, again, kind of falls into some of those age or high risk categories. And so that would definitely impact school operations. And so we're looking at more of a phased roll in. We're delaying the start of the school year until September 14th. And then after 2 weeks of operations, we have the opportunity to start for some limited in-person instruction. And so all students will get their primary instruction before lunch, and then as needed and required for enrichment, special services, special needs, we'll be able to start bringing in groups of kids for up to 2 hours in a day in the afternoon session. So a bit of a modified model. And then if our numbers continue in a positive manner, we would have half the kids in a rotational attendance in November. So kind of a phased roll in, phased start, to make sure that we have time to teach everybody the skills for the technology for learning online. Because even when we get to the point where we can have kids on campus, half of the kids will be remoting into that class to watch the live class that's going on. So starting out with a little bit, with that phase start and giving people a couple of weeks to get used to the technology, then bringing kids on the campus as the numbers allow. And again, people talk a lot about our county case rate as being a primary function of keeping us on or off campus. If you apply the same metric to kind of the school district with our regular zone, at one person with a new infection per week, we meet the threshold to be on the verge of closing. 2 or more, and we're back to distance learning. So with such a fine margin, we didn't want to start out necessarily on campus, and then by the end of week 1, have a presumed or a confirmed case, and then be back out again. We're kind of trying to prevent some whiplash for staff, students, and parents, and start out with a known quantity and then expand from there.
That's great. I appreciate your care. And this has been so difficult for any of us in education to monitor the cases, and guidance from state and federal authorities has been evolving as it has had to, as we've learned more about the pandemic and as we've seen, different hotspots pick up. What are you hearing about parents in the district, Andy? How are they responding to this phased in plan? What are you hearing from them?
Well, again, it's, I think for the most part, the response has been fairly positive. And again, it's a safety concern model first, making sure that we can meet educational needs, and then still have time for applied learning and have time to meet with kids and families individually, even if it's virtual, for the first month of the school year. And again, we want to keep everybody as safe as possible as we kind of go step by step, because, again, 2 weeks ago, the little outbreak we had here in Florence was half of what it would take to shut down the county for 3 weeks. So, we still need a couple more weeks of clean data before we can even start looking at kind of the on-ramp to getting back into the classrooms.
Very good. Very good. So Andy, don't go away, but I want to bring in Jody too. Jody and Andy mentioned, getting students used to the technology. We're talking primarily about access to the internet. That's got to be, it's difficult in Florence and the surrounding area, within the Siuslaw district, but it's got to be even more of a challenge in the upriver communities and for the Mapleton district. You want to talk about that a little bit and let us know what life is like in that regard for
Sure.
you and your staff as you think about that?
Sure. So Mapleton is also going comprehensive distance learning, K-12. That's how we're going to start. Again, we've pushed back our start date, just like Siuslaw, to September 14th. That allows us to have some staff training, but also bring students and families in to do some one-on-one orientation training with the technology, with the logins, with the schedule, just to make that personal connection at the beginning of the year that we didn't get to have at the end of the year. And so one of the things we have done is last week we had on-site registration where we brought every family in. They had assigned times so we could keep physical distancing and limit the number of interactions with others, so that we could know which families are planning to send their students to school in comprehensive distance learning, but then also so we could ask them questions about technology, access to the internet. Once we have that idea and the information, then we can reach out to the families or to the agencies that can help support families that don't have internet, or that have internet but that are paying exorbitant amounts for satellite where they live. And so that allows us to communicate with families. It also gives us the chance so that when we move from comprehensive distance learning to a hybrid, which would have half the students on campus every other day, to communicate with parents that that is an option. However, some parents are probably going to choose to keep their students in comprehensive distance learning due to either family members being at high risk or the student themselves being at high risk. And that is an option for our families as well. And so we're just trying to make it work for each individual family. While we are small and rural, we're also lucky in the fact that we can do that. I can look at a parent who struggles with the comprehensive distance learning schedule, wants to homeschool because they can't be online when we're asking them to, and work out a system where they can be online, but also be at home and working at different times. So we can help work around some of our parents' work schedules, that because that's a struggle for a lot of our families. So
Absolutely.
we're in communication with some technology associations and the Lane ESD to help support some of our families that there's no cell service and they live in a dead zone for internet service. While there's only a handful is enough that it makes it worthwhile for us to at least push that and see what we can do to help support them.
That's great. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
and again, we have some of the same kind of issues again with people, living in remote areas where satellite's really their only functional piece. So we did a survey last spring of who did and did not have internet. By the time we got down with all of the counts, again, we have about 40 homes, either, east of town or on the back sides of the lakes that really are only accessible by satellite. And so we're trying to identify some locations in town where parents could use that as a drop-in internet spot so that, they can go up and be there. Their kid could have access to the internet during the day. And that's also part of the Boys and Girls Club operations too, for the younger kids with how they run, so that they would have access to internet to remote into those classes as well. The other piece that we're doing here in the district is that, if you live in an area that does have cell service, for families that need, we do have 30 hotspots that we can issue. And for people that are struggling with, keeping up with the internet bill, we do have a kind of an internet, called a subsidy program, to make sure people can keep up with that, because it's going to be a necessity, for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we're talking about internet, let me talk to Mr. Internet, Robbie Wright, the CEO of HIAC here locally. And Robbie, you're part of a rural broadband group that's looking at broadband kind of statewide, and particularly in the rural areas over here in the coast and that sort of thing. Is that true?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of activity on the broadband front here lately. Part of the CARES Act that was recently passed had some a few dollars from a statewide perspective for some rural broadband capacity. Lane County overall had 6 applicants, and 3 of those were funded. And so the county as a whole got a pretty good chunk of that money. That's going to be pretty awesome. Western Lane County didn't necessarily get a bunch of love in that one, but Lane County as a whole was really well represented. So like Andy and Jody have seen, there's portions around the greater Florence area that really struggle with internet connectivity. If you live in town, you generally have a number of different options, but as soon as you start getting, in the outskirts of Mapleton or the outskirts of Silcoos, I think Lane County even has unique issues, or had unique issues down at by Ada and their old facility out there. You just start losing opportunity for anything cell phone service, satellite. Satellite can do good as long as you have a reasonably clear line of sight, but it tends to get really expensive. And the second that you start doing, Zoom videos, anything video related, is when you start to consume a lot of your bandwidth. So there's a number of kind of projects that are in flight, trying to figure out the best way to carry forward.
Very good. Who are the major providers in the area? What do you know about what they may be doing to help, if anything? What can you tell us? Are there
Sure,
resources?
the phone companies. There's a few of them, yeah. The phone company locally here in Florence is CenturyLink. They have a DSL-based service which runs over your phone lines. Charter Spectrum is the cable company. They provide television most all over town. They are they're the biggest internet provider in Florence. And then of course, us, HIAC, and Oregon Fast are the two local internet options. And so again, if you're kind of in that 8 square mile region of Florence, chances are pretty high that you're going to have some ability. And I'm going to butcher the numbers off the top of my head, Andy, but somewhere in that 5 to 8% of Siuslaw School District kids didn't have access to reliable internet here kind of at the beginning of this crisis. And so trying to find cost-effective ways to extend that service, or as Andy mentioned before, kind of local hotspots with, a big parking lot that can be socially distanced. Those sorts of things are a lot of the projects that are getting kicked around right now.
And Russ, in Mapleton, some of the bigger ones are Viasat, which is satellite, HughesNet satellite, and then Pioneer is also one of the ones that's providing, and then CenturyLink and the ones that Robbie mentioned too. But there's a few different ones that people are accessing up in Mapleton.
Okay. Pioneer, is that DSL or is that satellite?
It's fiber. Is that DSL?
DSL.
Okay, that's DSL.
Kind of close. Yeah. Pioneer, I think, kind of feeds that spot up and around Deadwood and kind of south of Deadwood, a little bit and north of Mapleton. Pioneer has kind of a spot from like Walport to Corvallis. And so as you start to get up north, up 36 a little bit, that's where Pioneer starts to kind of tilt in a little bit there.
Right.
And there is some extra money. The governor set aside about $29 million for the hotspots and do other things. So districts can apply for some of that money. And then, as was said earlier, that I'm on the rural broadband committee actually as well. And we've been trying to figure out how to get this out there for a long time. We convinced them to put $20 million into it. There's a university program where they're trying to circle the state with broadband. We gave $10 million to them and $10 million for these projects that Blaine County got some of it to reach out into the rural areas. You're starting to see other people come into it. Coos Curry Electric is now looking at getting into it for the Curry County and some of these places that these other typical companies are not going to. So broadband is as important and now as electricity is. So we've got to figure out how to get it to that last house down that last road. And it's going to be, if there's something that positive comes out of this whole Corona experience, it may be that we start really understanding the importance of internet, not only for schools, but for medical stuff and everything else. So.
Absolutely.
And to add even more information to Senator Roblin there, if I don't recall the exact number off the top of my head, but the state of Oregon had that about $10 million to give to those projects. And I want to say they had $130 million of ask for that grant. And so it kind of demonstrated the pent up demand for those programs across the state. Does that sound about right, Senator?
Yeah, and the thing that was interesting about it is that when we fought to get the $20 million, people said, well, they'll never be able to spend it by the end of the year because this is coronavirus money. There's no plan out there. And we knew there were plans. And the reality is this is not about the state providing it. It's about private companies that are already out there investing and doing this work. And those of us that have been in this for a while realize that there were a lot out there. I did not realize there were 100 million ready to go. But yeah, it was overwhelming in the first week that they actually put out the bids. They just got flooded with projects that all can be done between the time we had the money and the end of the year, which when you think about putting cable in the ground, I mean, you're talking about land use deal, and then there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And that's why most people didn't think it was happening. But the reality is these companies have been planning this and doing it and getting those permits and getting those right-of-ways for a long time. This extra money just helped them do it sooner.
That's
and
great.
We should do some more if we can.
Absolutely. And we should get to this part of Lane County too, Doug, on it.
Yes, we should.
Talking about internet, here at our campus, LCC in Florence, I've been really proud of our internet. We have great internet in the building. Students are able to access via Wi-Fi. I've always been amazed at how many of our students don't really have laptops or even tablets. Most of them are doing things on their cell phones. And I've been a little stymied with the pandemic. We've got this great internet, but apparently no good way to access it outside of our four walls, and we can't let people in our four walls currently. So it's been a little maddening to have good access that doesn't extend much beyond the boundaries of our actual building.
But since we're
So-
talking about internet, Andy G just texted me and his internet just dropped. So
Yeah, I
he'll
just
be
saw
back.
he wanted back in. He should be back
Okay,
on here. In a
okay.
second. That's true. Well, one good thing about our situation again, LCC has great internet, across campus, and LCC obviously has always had a lot of online courses and ability to do things via Zoom and that sort of thing. But I think we're going to be a lot stronger coming out of this because much more of LCC's sort of internet infrastructure has been boosted. So we now have good access to things like tutors and financial aid officers and some of the particular special services that we don't have people trained for here in Florence. We're going to be able to access that going forward. So I'm feeling good about our future if we just get through these next several months. Winter is coming, as they used to say on a particular HBO show, if I remember correctly. And I've been reading a lot about, what it's going to be like when the flu season hits. And a lot of flu symptoms are very much like some of the early symptoms of the coronavirus, COVID-19. Let's start with the two district superintendents, so Andy and Jody. How are you feeling about that? What do you know about that? How are you preparing for that for winter and the dark stormy days ahead? Tell me more.
Well, schools always seem to be a hotbed for flus and some communal illnesses. But again, at this time of the year, we would be in most likely in a hybrid mode. So again, students would be still in masks and 6-foot distance. So hopefully that'll control some of the aspects. And again, we've got reporting protocols in place as set by Lane County Public Health for reporting presumed or confirmed cases within student groups or across the school. Again, people will be able to make an informed decision about whether or not their kids, they want to send their kids to class until things are resolved. Do we know if that was just the allergies, a cold, the flu, or something else? And again, that's part of the, being at home is, while you're remoting in, it's either comprehensive distance learning for you on your off day, or if you're taking a couple of off days, you're still not missing any content because you're still tracking along with the live class that's going on. But again, the real piece is people are going to have to, kind of take those health precautions seriously. We have some like self-screener documents for parents and families to use at home to determine whether or not, the student's healthy enough to come to school to begin with. And again, I don't think anybody wants to be the one that gets anybody else ill. And so, unless a student has been symptom-free from, fever and everything else for at least 24 hours, they would be excluded from school. And it's a matter of making sure, people take appropriate precautions before coming back, because, rushing back onto campus, besides the reality of, possibly getting sick, you also have, again, the kind of the fear associated with, and the wonder of, how people were sick or how they're doing with what was going on. So sorry, my office mate is needing attention again.
Well, your office mate is awfully cute, so we'll give you that. Jody, anything to add in terms of how you're preparing?
Just elementary schools in particular, and I see Mike's on the call, so he can nod his agreement, are germ factories. And so it is actually going to be tough when the flu hits to determine the difference between what's the flu, what's the virus, what's COVID-19. We do have screening protocols that we all have to have in place before we even think about reopening for on-site hybrid anytime we bring kids on campus. And those all have to be approved through Oregon Health Authority and our local Lane County Public Health Authority. So basically, it's going to be tough. If they have a fever, they're going to have to be home for so many days and hours before they can come back and then if there's other symptoms involved. So it's going to be really tricky once we move to on-site, any form of on-site learning, whether it's limited in person, K through 3, or a hybrid model. It's going to be tricky, especially at the elementary level with little kids who catch everything under the sun.
And our health,
I have a quick, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was say our health departments are very concerned that people are staying away from doctors' offices because they don't want to get exposed, and therefore they're not getting their kids in to get the flu shot. And when they start coming out, which will be in the next month or so, people need to get their flu shot. And I would tell them, as I know I've already made my appointment with my doctor's office, get it early, because you want to make sure there's enough flu shots around. And what we don't want is people have the ability to get the flu, and on top of that get the coronavirus. I think it can be really disastrous, and that's the fear of a lot of the health department people, that people aren't going to take care of the flu that we know about or we anticipate for this year, and the flu that we don't have anything to do with.
Yeah, as I understand it, the flu is actually a great vector for the virus. It makes you more susceptible because it hits some of those same systems in our bodies, and it ends up allowing the coronavirus to hit you harder than it would have if it were only the coronavirus. So that's good counsel for all of us. Get your flu shot.
I have a quick question. Can I interrupt?
Yes, ma'am.
Just one quick thing on the flu shot. When I lived in Orange County, Kaiser was a huge provider down there, and we got our flu shots in the car. We didn't even have to get out of the car.
Yep.
And they would do 10,000 shots a day. It was the craziest thing. One day my brother was with us, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to go get my flu shot." And he was like, "Oh." And I pulled in the parking lot, rolled up my sleeve, got it, and drove off. And I was, like 3 minutes, and he just was astounded. So maybe we can incorporate something like that here and get people done without having to germ everything up. One of my questions that I wanted to talk about was, what about kids that don't have the devices that they need for the learning devices? What if they don't have a tablet? What if they don't have a computer? What if, can they use their phone? Is this distance learning going to be smartphone friendly? What are we doing to equip them for this type of learning?
So I'll go. I'll
Go ahead.
So we have actually used some of the funding that the legislature has provided us, thank you very much, to purchase Chromebooks. We already had a one-to-one program for our 9th through 12th graders. And so this summer we have purchased for K3, their touchscreen Chromebooks. It's a little bit more developmentally appropriate for them to touch and do the work on the screen rather than trying to maneuver the mouse. And then 3rd through 8th grade, we've purchased Chromebooks. That's part of our orientation on September 7th or 8th, 9th, and 10th is bringing them in, teaching them how to use it. Here's your login. Here's how you maneuver it. Parents, you got any questions? So that they feel comfortable, at least if they don't know how to do something, they at least could call in for questions. And we're going to have a technology hotline, helpline for them to call as well. But so we've actually purchased enough Chromebooks for students. And then for staff, it's interesting, who thought when I ordered computers 4 years ago when we did the bond that we would need webcams. None of them have webcams. So we purchased webcams for all the teachers and staff, not just teachers, but any staff that will be hosting online meetings so that they can do that from their classrooms and their office areas and be a part of it. So.
And are you using Google Classrooms? What's the learning environment?
So our high school, middle school, high school, so 7-12 is using Google Classroom and Google Meet.
That is mobile compliant, yes?
Yes. And then I also need to say we do have a home web filtering software that is on all of the Chromebooks that we offer our students. Some students prefer to use their own. We make sure parents know, well, ours has a web filtering that does this and this and this, but it's up to you. It's your choice. And then for our K through 6th graders, we virtually meet like this in Zoom, but we're using Clever, which is a single login, single sign-in portal. So the kids sign in and then I see Mike, I think you guys are using the same thing, right? Clever and Seesaw. I actually got this from Mike, so I'm going to give him props
face
for
shield
this.
a moment ago too.
Yeah. So they can log into Clever. They have one login. And from that login, they can get to Dreambox, Wonders Online, Zoom, any of the apps that Clever supports. And so it's a much simpler process, especially for our little guys and girls, so that they can log in easier. So we do have different learning platforms for the different grade levels, but that, to me, that's a little bit more developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
Andy?
Andy, address what Stanislaus up to.
Okay, so first off, again, we'll have enough Chromebooks for all the students to have their own at home. We also purchased additional Chromebooks for teachers, because again, not every teacher has a device at home that has, you know, a webcam and a microphone on it. We've also outfitted their classrooms with webcams for their workstations there. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible to make sure when they're working from home with their Chromebooks, we're going out and purchasing some additional wireless keyboards, mouse, and headsets. So it's, you know, fairly seamless. You know, again, there's a worldwide shortage on Chromebooks these days. Everybody seems to be buying them. And the one factory that makes the Google Suite chip, they seem to be behind on their ordering right now. So we were lucky enough to get in. I mean, we kind of thought we were getting this far, you know, back in June, and started our ordering process then, because we were going to have them and need them no matter what. You know, the high school and middle school will be primarily Google Meets. For kids that need to be in an asynchronous mode, we'll have access to Edgenuity classes, so they can do those on time. Our elementary students, K3, will be involved with Seesaw. The 4-5 will have IXL as part of their regular class structure. And then we're also using Schoology, which is kind of a monitoring, not necessarily monitoring software, but in essence, if you're using our machine, and it doesn't matter what network you're on, it will provide filtering blocks. Parents can set, you know, time restrictions for use after hours. You know, hopefully kids are using their Chromebooks for school and not for just, you know, chatting with their friends or gaming or whatever, you know, late at night. And so we'll have some more access and controls on those. Yeah, and so we've kind of got the gamut of what we think people are going to need right now. And again, then we get to thinking about all the kids needing, you know, you can't have, you know, 10 kids in the classroom all watching different parts of videos or listening to other people. So we're getting a slew of extra headphones with microphones, so people can, you know, kind of be a little bit sound secure with everybody else. I think that covers the kind of the big aspects to our technology piece. Again, we'll make sure that people have a device in hand. And so again, that's part of the reason for starting the school year a little bit later, so we can do the training, but also because, again, you know, we've got stuff that's coming in waves and shipments. And it should all be here by the end of next week, and we got to get it unboxed, inventoried, and then back out to issue during orientation week.
Very good. Let's pivot and talk a bit about childcare. We all know that school is often sort of the first place that working parents turn to, you know, for their students to be safe, their school-age students to be safe during the days. What is happening either at the state level, Senator Roblin, or even ways the district might be thinking about childcare, and what are we doing to help parents that they're trying to be sure their students are safe and enabling themselves to get back to work when they need to?
You know, we put more money from the Student Success Act into early childhood than they've ever had before. We're trying to figure out how to raise up the systems that we've had in place. Most of the early childhood care has been privately owned, and we lost a lot of it during this pandemic because they had restrictions with respect to how many square feet they had to have for each child and all the other kinds of things they needed to do. And when people were staying at home, they weren't using the child care. as a state, and in particular on the coast, have been a desert for childcare all along. So, you know, it is difficult to find reliable childcare. People were looking for their family members that weren't working, for grandparents. Boys and girls clubs filled a big purpose for that, and they have some restrictions with respect to how many people they can put in their facilities. So all of the issues with respect to childcare are big. We have some more money that we're trying to get out to do that. We've had some big conversations. I just had a conversation the other day with Yamhill County, because I'm on Zoom meetings about 6 hours a day now. But we had a big conversation about how do we support local businesses coming together and helping subsidize. Childcare does not pay well, and they didn't have a lot of reserves. So when their people didn't show up, they pretty much went out of business. And so figuring out, as we come back from this, how do we reorganize? How do we get subsidies from the federal government? Because I think everybody now knows how important having quality childcare is. And so it's going to be an interesting mix of different groups having to work together to try to figure that out. But you know, there have been in places. I went to the University of Washington in Bellevue area. Microsoft and those others decided we have to have childcare for our workers, and so they actually in one area bought a mall and then hired early childhood staff to come and take it over, so that parents could have a place where they knew they could send their kids, and it got all wired so you could watch your kids while you were at your desk at work, so you knew what was going on. We're going to have to figure out ways in which groups can come together to help subsidize it, because the cost of childcare is really expensive, and trying to keep a business going where you can only have, you know, X number of kids in a space, and you need to have adults in a ratio that's much higher than the ratio for schools. It gets fairly expensive, and we don't pay people very well. So this is a really big issue that we're going to have to come to figure out in this country, and in our state and in our region.
Absolutely. I'm tracking the chat, by the way, and I encourage our audience to look in the chat. And if you have questions, let us know too. But I see especially a little conversation between Chuck Trent with the Boys and Girls Club and Bob Teeter with SOS. And they're both very interested in that issue as well. SOS apparently has some monies that can be help with childcare in certain circumstances. And of course, Boys and Girls Club does such a good job with after school programs and things like that. So there's certainly resources that both probably need some funding and also have some limited funding available to help local parents as well.
And they need PPE and all those other things. I mean, that's the other thing that the schools have had to figure out is how do we get the needed PPE that we need for all of our kids. So if they need a mask, they have one. The teachers have the equipment they need to be safe as well. So all of those things take resources.
Yeah, we just installed big old plexiglass shields right here today. So I know all about that. Andy or Jody, anything you want to add about childcare? Anything you're aware of, and you don't need to, but if there's something that's top of mind?
I know preschool has been on my mind just because we just opened our preschool a year ago.
Yeah.
And right now there's no plan to as to what that looks like. Early Learning Division just came out with their guidance Friday, and I have not had a chance to look at it, but I'm meeting with my preschool teacher tomorrow to just talk about what could preschool look like for our families. But that's different than childcare. Childcare has to follow much different regulations than we do for schools. So there is no other than in-home daycare options available for Mapleton families. It's been a struggle before the pandemic. It's even more so now. And I wish I had an answer. We're working as hard as we can to find those families and support them, but it's a difficult challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Jody, tell us about your Zoom background. I like that. What is it?
Oh, we did, oh my goodness, what was it called? It was like Friday Night Lights, Be the Light type thing for our seniors, because we lit our football stadium up every Friday night for 24 minutes. It had to do with the number of seniors that we had. and 2 minutes for everyone. And we just lit it up. And this was the first night we did it. I took a picture and it was just pretty awe-inspiring. It's one of my favorite pictures. But it was just a way for us to honor our seniors and know that we're still thinking about them. We're still out there. And about the third night, Friday night, we lit it up. You could just hear the community around the football field. As soon as the lights went on, it's like this big cheer came up. Like, oh, there, you know, so it was not just inspiring to our kids, but also to the community, just to say, hey, we're still here. We're still thinking about you. So that's what the background is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I know both districts did a great job helping students to feel connected and engaged and honored through this last year. And I'm sure you're thinking of ways to do that again as we launch another school year. Since I'm looking at your football stadium there, what are we doing about socialization for students in school? You know, schools are a great place for athletics, for after school clubs, academic endeavors, all those sorts of things. Is any of that happening? How are you thinking about that? Maybe Andy, let's start with you at Siuslaw. What are you thinking about in that regard?
Well, again, part of our strategy is looking at applied learning time, where students would have some time to interact virtually, and then when we get to limited in-person instruction, have those interactions with students and staff on campus when we get into October. When it comes to, athletics, right now, we're kind of in a pause. We're waiting till at least October, before we kind of resume any sort of, workouts or, kind of voluntary practice pieces. The OSA season is not going to officially start until December 28th. And so we've got to make sure that kids are healthy and ready to go, and we're going to take care of academics first before we start kind of launching back into athletics. We coached football for 15 years, so athletics are near and dear to my heart. And it's the student athletes first, and student being primary in that.
Yes.
As it's healthy and safe, after we get the school year started, we'll start organizing probably, it's again, just general workouts. We can't have necessarily practices. It's, it's kind of hard to, block a tackling dummy and not be within 6 feet of somebody else. There's a bunch of things you physically can't do. I don't know how you wrestle when you're 6 feet away from somebody, other issues. And so again, OSA is doing a really good job meeting with their medical advisory staff, and still looking a way to provide students with an opportunity for some athletic competition. But it's primarily going to be in the winter and spring, looking at basically running 3 shorter sets of seasons. We would start at the end of December, and then kind of, January, February, you would see the traditional, basketball, wrestling. Then we would move into a short, 8-week season or so of football, cross country, volleyball. And then in the spring, you would see baseball, softball, track and field to finish out the year. So again, it's not going to be what it typically is with a 12-week season, but 3 consecutive 8-week seasons. So at least there's an experience for every kid during the year, as long as people get healthy.
Yeah. There you go. Jody. Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
Well, just so, Andy, you covered sports really well. That was really comprehensive, and as frustrating as it is for our athletes, I also feel it for our kids. So some of the things that we're trying to do is we're offering a daily story time with our librarian, where she's just going to have a Zoom link open and read a story. Anyone can log in. We're even offering it to homeschool families that just want to log in, and then they can all see each other like we can see each other, and listen to a story if they want to. And then our leadership class has actually asked to find ways to have assemblies. Find a way that we can all log in, and I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm sure that kids are a little more tech savvy than adults are. They'll figure out a way to make those connections, because that's one of the biggest things that's missing, is the connections with the adults at school, but also the kid-to-kid connections. So.
The
That's-
state did make sure that we get some money to FFA and some of the other organizations that are out there trying to do things, and they've come up with some unique programs in FFA to keep kids engaged and stuff. So I think everybody's trying to figure out the problem that we're having with sports. We just had the amateur tournament down at Bandon Dunes. They all had to get tested before they got there. They all had to get tested when they got there. Those tests are not inexpensive.
Right.
So if you're going to start having sports going on, you're going to have to test kids and find out if they're healthy or not. Our state, because we have done better than about 80% of the rest of the states, so we're in the bottom 13 states in the country with the total number of cases and total number of deaths. So because of that, we have a really hard time getting testing supplies. So our testing as a state has gone down over the last number of months, weeks, because we can't get the supplies. And what you need is supplies that you can test today and know the answer today, not 4 weeks from now, if you want to do any of these kinds of things. And so, again, we're going to have to figure out how do we get Abbott tests and other kinds of things so that athletes can find out. So you don't put people, especially if they're going to go from one school to another, from one area where it may be really under control, another area where it's not under control. I will be surprised what we do. You looked at the Pac-12, they just closed her down. I mean, I think we're going to have to be careful about that. The things that Jody's talking about, giving opportunities for kids to see each other and talk, I think is going to be really important.
Indeed. So we're winding down. We just got a couple of minutes left. I want to ask Robbie Wright, who's the chair of the Florence City Community and Economic Development Committee. And Robbie, I'm on that committee as well. And I know we haven't met for a while because of the pandemic, but
Yep.
what can you tell us? What we're going to have a big, long 2-hour meeting tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. What can you tell us about what you're thinking about, what the city staff might be thinking about with respect to the coronavirus and the future of our city economically and our region as well?
Sure. Like you kind of just touched on, Russ, we have been a little bit unfortunate. We had our very first committee meeting back in January, and it was all mainly like legal city, what you can say, what you can't say type of stuff. And then COVID happened, and we've been on kind of hiatus. And so this will be our first meeting kind of back in the saddle with everybody. And so what we're actually going to do is really just kind of a high level review of a lot of stuff that's been going on in the state and the county. And so we have a number of different organizations that are going to come in and spend 5 or 10 minutes with the group and kind of give us a rundown of kind of the current state of where we're at. Both Kelly and Sarah at the city kind of were dual economic development hands a little bit. And so both of them will be in attendance, of course, and we'll have people from RDI, Rural Development Initiatives, numerous county folks here that are going to be kind of giving the group some updates. And what I'm really trying to hope to get out of it is kind of some of our future next steps. There's been a lot of progress and little things happening kind of behind the scenes. And so what we're trying to do in this particular meeting is bring some of those behind the scenes actions up to the forefront, talk about them as a group, and kind of see where we can help drive next.
Excellent. So it just turned 5 o'clock. If you have a 5 o'clock meeting, I just want to highlight that and we'll let you go. I've got one last question that I want to send Senator Roblin's way. Senator Roblin, you're retiring at the when your term is up, and we're sad to lose you. But I noted, you've been doing a series of fireside chats on KXCR, and those have been really well attended and really great. I've logged on to a couple of those. And one of the sessions I noted was titled Oregon After the Coronavirus Pandemic. So I wondered, if you can give us just a word of hope. What's life going to be like in another several months?
Actually, all of them are upbeat. We try to talk about the things that we can do and what's going on. Last night we had Representative Schrader talking about kinds of what's happening at Congress and an understanding that we're probably going to get some more money. He doesn't know exactly what it's going to look like. And that I think we're going to come back. When that is what's hard. If we're waiting for a vaccine, that could be a long time. I think what we have come to understand is that for the next foreseeable future, people need to have to recognize that each and every one of us is in this together. That when we wear masks, we're not protecting ourselves as much as we're protecting the next person to us. And if we want to get this under control, and Oregon has done it better than most states, if we want to get it under control, it means that we all have to take responsibility for ourselves. You know, I was talking to some people up the coast that have been having a lot of influx of visitors from all over the country. I mean, they were talking about New York license plates. People don't want to fly, so they drive. Coming to the coast. They had a big group of people that came from Idaho, and they didn't want to wear masks. I mean, I think that we've got to keep teaching people that we're in this together, and if we want to live with it and get moving with our economy and other kinds of stuff, we need to take those tried and true practices from around the world, and we know they work. We need to wear masks. We need to wash our hands. We need to teach our kids that that's important as well. And we need to not think that it's a right not to wear a mask. I don't understand where these people have come up with some of these ideas, but in order to get to live with whatever we're going to have to live with in the future, we all, as Oregonians and as people in the United States, we need to make sure that we take care of each other, and we show kindness, and we recognize that when we're standing in line, we can do that being grumpy, or we can do that with a smile on our face, realizing, hey, let's take life a little slower today and not worry about it. Let's do the kinds of things that we need to do as human beings to take care of each other. And I think that's what the future holds for those of us who want to make sure that we get through this and make it work. Our kids will get to be athletes again. Our young kids are going to get to spend time with each other. Those things are going to happen. As a grandparent, you know, my wife reads to our grandkids every night, and they're in Bethesda, Maryland. So the technology has been helpful. We aren't going to get to hug them for a while, but that's okay, because we can find other ways to do that. And you don't want to be the person that gives it to a loved one. And so be sure and remember that this virus is insidious in the fact that many of the people up in Newport, when they had the fish plant, got sick. Over 60% of the people had no symptoms. You know, so this is an asymptomatic disease that can transmit when you don't feel like you're sick at all. So that's why the masks are important. You don't have to feel sick to give it to somebody, but you can certainly keep it within your own confines and not spread it. So again, that's what we came to in the conclusion in the conversations we've had. Schrader did a nice job of saying the same thing last night. Wear your masks, wash your hands, do the right things.
Very good. Thank you so much, Senator Roblin. And those are wise words. For those of us who are still here, do you want to join me in a Zoom applause round for Senator Roblin and our superintendents, Jody and Andy and Robbie Wright? Let's thank them. I want to, I'm going to turn it over to Bettina for any final last words, but I just have to share this. Can you see that?
Yep.
There you go. That's my favorite meme currently. Bettina, any final last words as we wrap this up today?
It's so funny that you share that, because I was trying to look on my phone to find it to share it. I just think that's classic. So yes, I do. I just want to, you know, from my heart, thank everybody, our panelists, for sharing your time, and all of our attendees that came and participated. And thank you for your support of the Chamber. We support the community, and the community supports us. And when it's teamwork, it doesn't seem work. So we appreciate all of you and your help and your support. And stay tuned. Our next webinar will be coming up, and it will be on the topic of childcare. So we'll be wrangling some interesting panelists to come and share resources, challenges, and solutions. And sometimes the solution is to be patient, right? You know, one of my favorite prayers is, Lord, give me patience, but give it to me now. So I think that we can all just exercise a little fruit of the Spirit and be kind and be patient. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again, Zooming soon. And thanks especially to Russ for being our moderator and our Zoom host.
Thank you, one and all. Have a great rest of your day. Again, thanks to our panelists. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.